On a quiet September morning in 2020, 19-year-old Sydney West walked out into the fog of San Francisco and seemingly vanished without a trace. One moment, she was a young woman with a future still unfolding ahead of her. The next, she was gone, leaving behind devastated loved ones, haunting questions, and a mystery that has only deepened with time. Her disappearance near the Golden Gate Bridge has become one of those cases that lingers in the mind long after you hear it, because there are so few answers and so much that does not make sense.
Tonight, we're diving into the heartbreaking and unsettling case of Sydney West, who she was, what happened in the hours before she disappeared, and why her story continues to grip so many people years later. Was this a tragic accident? A deliberate disappearance? Or is there something more hidden beneath the surface of that fog-covered morning? In this episode, we'll walk through the timeline, the theories, and the painful uncertainty surrounding a young woman who seemed to vanish into thin air.
What's that? Just the emergency.
No problem. All units are I'm at the corner of Pleasant Hill and John Young Freeway.
1519 East 18.
Welcome back to Crime Solvers Central. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Jace. What makes this case hit especially hard is that Sydney wasn't some distant headline people forgot about overnight. She was a daughter, a student with plans, a young woman who had roots in both North Carolina and the Bay Area, and whose family has spent years trying to figure out what happened that morning.
The official information released early in the investigation said she was considered at risk. And from the start, that shaped how people looked at the case. But even with that context, the unanswered questions never really went away.
That's exactly why this case still gets discussed. Because when people hear the broad outline, they think they understand it. But once you slow down and really sit with the details, the time of day, the location, the surveillance footage, the lack of clear public answers, it becomes one of those disappearances that feels much more complicated than a one-line summary.
And tonight, we're going to walk through the case carefully, respectfully, and stick as closely as we can to what has actually been reported.
And as always, before we get deeper into this, we want to say this clearly. This episode is about a real missing person. Sydney's family is still living with insurmountable pain and uncertainty.
So the goal here is not sensationalism. It's awareness, respectful discussion, and hopefully keeping her name in front of people who may know something.
Sydney West had ties to both California and North Carolina. Public coverage over the years described her as someone who had grown up in the Bay Area for part of her life before her family relocated to North Carolina.
She was also publicly described as being connected to UC Berkeley, and multiple reports identified her as a student preparing for the next chapter of life. That matters because when people disappear, context matters. Where they were emotionally, geographically, and personally.
Right, because this wasn't a case where somebody had been missing for weeks before anybody noticed. Her disappearance was recognized quickly. The San Francisco Police Department said that a family member reported her missing on October 2nd, 2020.
The police stated she was last believed to have been seen in the Crissy Field area on the morning of September 30th. The family site later added a more specific detail, that she was last seen around 6:45 in the morning entering the Golden Gate Bridge area.
And that early morning timing is important. Because when people hear about the Golden Gate Bridge, they picture this huge, visible landmark. They imagine a place where surely someone would have seen something clear, something definitive happen.
But the reporting around the case repeatedly emphasized that the conditions that morning included fog, and in some accounts, reduced visibility from wildfire smoke. That means the location was famous, yes, but visibility was not necessarily good.
That image is one of the reasons this case has stayed with so many people. A young woman walking into a landscape that was literally obscured. It almost feels symbolic, which makes it more disturbing.
Public reporting in later years said surveillance footage showed Sydney walking toward the bridge area, and some coverage described it as her effectively disappearing into the fog. But even with cameras in the area, there was no public release of some simple, definitive answer that closed the loop.
And another detail that made the case more visible over time is that Sydney's family did not stop pushing. Their website remains active. The case is still presented there as an open missing person case, and they publicized a reward that was later increased to $25,000 for information leading to her location and return.
That tells you two things at once. First, they've never stopped looking. And second, they clearly do not feel that the public has gotten every answer it needs.
And that's where the emotional core of this case lives. Families can survive a lot of things, but uncertainty is its own kind of cruelty. In many cases, people at least get a conclusion, however painful. There are certain missing person cases that get lodged in people's minds because they seem to violate common sense. Sydney vanished in a heavily recognized, heavily traveled area. There was surveillance in the area. There were other people around.
Yet still, no public explanation emerges that ends the story. That gap between what people expect and what actually happened is what keeps this case so alive in the public imagination.
People think, how does someone go missing there? How does a disappearance happen in a place that's photographed constantly, visited constantly, and talked about constantly? And the answer may be that famous places can still hide terrible uncertainty.
Especially when conditions are bad and when a timeline is narrow. But emotionally, it's hard for people to accept. It feels like there should be a witness, a clear video, a decisive clue, something. And yet, publicly, nothing has closed the case.
And I think families watching stories like this often identify with the same nightmare. The sudden shift from ordinary life into endless doubt. One day, your loved one is part of your everyday world. Then, a phone call doesn't come.
The family of a missing Cal Berkeley student who was last seen in San Francisco is now offering more money for information into her disappearance. The family of Sydney West now offering $25,000 for information on where she could be. The increased reward money comes on the same day of her 20th birthday. Sydney has been missing since the morning of September 30th when she was last seen on the Golden Gate Bridge.
So when people talk about this case, a few broad possibilities usually come up. And as always, we strive to be very careful with this segment of the show. These are theories people discuss, not conclusions we are claiming as facts.
The first and most commonly discussed possibility is that something tragic happened in or near the Golden Gate Bridge area that morning. That idea has followed the case from very early on, partly because of where Sydney was last believed to be, and partly because the official police release said she was considered at risk.
But even with that, what stands out is that the family and others have continued pressing for answers rather than treating the case as settled publicly.
A second possibility people discuss is whether there was some form of accident, misadventure, or encounter that has never been fully reconstructed in the public. And again, this is where caution matters. There is no widely reported, publicly confirmed evidence that clearly establishes foul play.
But in unresolved cases, people naturally examine every gap in the timeline and ask whether there could have been an interaction or event that investigators never had enough evidence to prove.
And then there's the third category, which is the hardest for families because it prolongs everything. The idea that someone, somewhere, knows a detail that they haven't shared because they think it's too small to matter. Maybe they saw a person. Maybe they noticed an item. Maybe they had a conversation that felt unimportant at the time.
In missing person cases, tiny details sometimes become the hinge that everything swings on. That's why families so often keep asking for tips even years later.
The reason I think this case still needs visibility is that unresolved disappearances rely on memory and public pressure. Not every breakthrough comes fast. Not every witness understands what they saw in the moment.
That's especially important in cases like this, where it can pull people towards storytelling instead of truth. The fog, the bridge, the early hour, the surveillance angle. It almost writes itself into myth if people aren't careful. But families don't need myth. They need facts. They need leads. They need honesty. One thing that keeps coming back to me in Sydney's case is how a disappearance can become frozen in one single morning. For her family, September 30th, 2020 is not just a date. It's an unfinished sentence. It's the beginning of a question they still haven't been able to put down.
And you can hear that in the continued advocacy around her case. The website, the reward, the contact information, the effort to keep her story circulating. Those things don't exist because a family is living in the past. They exist because they're still fighting for a future where they get answers.
There's also something very difficult about cases involving young adults, because the public sometimes assumes that independence means distance.
But 19 is still so young. Families know their child's routines, their hopes, their emotional rhythms. So when something breaks from the pattern, that alarm is immediate and deeply personal.
So where does that leave this case today? Publicly, it leaves it unresolved. Sydney West is still listed by her family as missing from San Francisco since September 30th, 2020.
The family website says there is a $25,000 reward for information leading to her location and return, and it provides contact information for private investigator Scott Dudek.
If you know something, even if it feels minor, even if you've talked yourself into thinking it doesn't matter, this is the time to come forward.
According to the family site, tips can be directed to investigator Scott Dudek at 925-705-8328 or at dudek.associates at gmail.com. The San Francisco Police Department also publicly asked for information in the case when the investigation began.
And for those watching who don't have direct information, there's still something you can do. Keep Sydney's name visible. Share reputable information. Stick to the verified details. Don't turn a real person into internet fiction. Awareness only helps when it stays responsible.
And if you want to help through this platform, you can also send credible tips or leads to Crime Solvers Central so they can be passed along appropriately. But the most important thing is that actionable information reaches the proper investigators and authorities. Public attention matters, but the right tip in the right hands matters even more.
Sydney West has been missing for almost 6 years now, but unresolved does not mean forgotten. Cases stay alive when people continue to say the name, continue to re-examine the timeline, and continue to believe that somebody out there may still hold the missing piece.
If this episode moved you, then please help us keep stories like Sydney's in front of people who may be able to make a difference. Please share this video, subscribe to Crime Solvers Central, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future cases.
And most importantly, keep Sydney West in your thoughts and in your prayers. Keep her story circulating responsibly. And if you know something, say something.
As always, stay safe, stay curious, and stay loud.